While the daily demands and expectations of modern life continue to expand and accelerate, our needs remain constant. We need clean water, reliable energy, and the ability to communicate efficiently. These are the things that make life possible and drive progress. For more than 100 years, Black & Veatch has designed and built critical human infrastructure that solves complex challenges in energy, water, and communications. We stand by what makes us stand out: reliable, innovative solutions that offer long-term value, protecting us today and preparing us for tomorrow. We start with forward-thinking services that become the foundations for EPC and design-build projects. Data and smart analytics provide a vision of what's to come and allow our cities of the future to be more secure and sustainable. Our commitment to deliver value to clients, improve the lives of people and communities they serve, and to safeguard the environment is unwavering. Which is why, as always, we remain dedicated to building a world of difference.
Hello, I'm Brandon Presley. I'm president of NARUC this year and also a commissioner on the Mississippi Public Service Commission. And we're in for a great discussion today about a topic that's very timely with all of the connectivity issues that we have seen surrounding the pandemic, and really how broadband access and internet connectivity is one of the top issues in this pandemic and coming out of this pandemic that we are all going to have to work together on. And so I'm pleased today to moderate this panel entitled Zap the Gap, Telecom on the Energy Grid. Great discussion today with two leaders in industry that have done remarkable work. One that I have personal knowledge of that work because I've worked with him on, and I've monitored and watched from afar Brad's work. And so I'm so very pleased to have two great panelists with us today that I'm going to introduce, and then we're going to jump right into a discussion. And so let me just kick it off with introducing my friend Haley Fisackerly, who is CEO of Entergy Mississippi. I'm going to read Haley's bio, although I know him very well. Haley is the president and CEO of Entergy Mississippi, an electric utility that serves 449,000 customers in 45 of Mississippi's 82 counties. He was named up to the post in June of 2008. Haley's responsible for Entergy Mississippi's electric distribution grid, customer service, economic development, charitable contributions, regulatory and public affairs, as well as the company's financial performance. During his tenure as CEO, Entergy Mississippi has seen a steady rise in customer satisfaction scores as measured by J.D. Power and Associates, which recognized the company as the top brand in customer service in 2017. Haley, I'm not going to go through all of these paragraphs, but he's from Columbus, Mississippi, same part of the area, same area of the state as I am. Haley's been recognized as a leader throughout our state on so many initiatives, and with Mississippi Economic Council, the Mississippi Energy Institute, great involvement at Mississippi State. And again, Haley and I have worked together very much on tons of projects in our state that I think we're going to mention some today. Brad Hall is the Vice President of External Affairs for Appalachian Power Company. Brad is VP for Appalachian Power Company with the responsibility for customer services, corporate communications, government affairs, economic development, community affairs, environmental issues, covering the company's territories in Tennessee, Virginia, and West Virginia. Previously, Brad was External Affairs Manager at Kentucky Power Company. Before joining Kentucky Power in 2012, he was an entrepreneur who owned Classic Home Designs in Pikeville, Kentucky, and simultaneously served as the president and CEO of the Southeast Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. These two guys have done a ton of work in this space, and as I said, have been true leaders in every sense of the word in the area of trying to make sure that we are all on the same team, both electric utilities and telecom providers, as we move forward trying to modernize not only the electric grid, but also to connect rural America and those underserved and unserved communities as a team effort, as a collaborative effort. And so with those intros, guys, I'm going to jump straight into questions, and y'all bat them back and forth. This is going to be a conversation, so we're not bound by real strict rules. First up, both Entergy and Appalachian Power are pioneers to use the energy grid to bring telecommunications to underserved communities. Can you both describe the work that you've done so far and why it was important to your companies to get involved in this space, and really why it's important to your customers? So whoever wants to jump up first, take that, and when the next one can roll in with their response.
Well, Brandon, I'll go ahead if you don't mind, Brad. And first, why is this important? Bringing telecommunication services to our underserved communities is very important to our business. It's not just that these customers need it for telecommunication services, but the utility industry needs it. Our customers need it when it comes to keeping up with outages, so we can give them information and keep them informed. It's accessing billing information to get real-time information about their bills. It's accessing the energy efficiency programs. And we do know this too, Brandon, that more and more consumers today want to interact through a mobile device or on the computer, and they really don't want to call us, and they can do it whenever they want to. But there's also other benefits. As you mentioned already, we need it for virtual learning opportunities, distance learning in schools. We need it for workforce training, something we're all very passionate about. And telehealth plays a very important. So it benefits our customers, it benefits the communities. how did we come about that? We, with the partnership and the encouragement from the Mississippi Public Service Commission, we knew that there was this opportunity that we needed to improve fiber services for our business. It wasn't until we were challenged by you, Brandon, to think about how do we use that in a way to improve rural offering to underserved areas that need internet access. And we found a partnership with Ceasefire Communications, who's headquartered right here in Mississippi, Richland, Mississippi. And through that partnership, we learned here was a service we needed, but it was too costly for us. They were trying to get into these rural areas. That was too costly for them. But until we came together and formed this partnership, it turned out to be a win-win for us all. So that is, in a nutshell, the partnership that we formed. We're able to get the fiber service we need to improve our operational and services we offer our customers. And Ceasefire got a way to get fiber investments into rural areas to offer their services to underserved areas.
Good point. One quick thing, Brad. 30,000 Mississippians got access. 250,000 folks had their speeds increased because of that project. Brad, tell us about Appalachian Power.
Well, that's great. I appreciate that, Haley, and thanks, Brandon, for the introduction and being part of this panel today. This is an exciting project for us at Appalachian Power and AEP. We've been working on this for a couple of years now, starting back in very early 2018. We saw it as important, and probably much like Haley and everyone else that's involved in this, is that we've got a lot of rural territory. We provide service in very rural West Virginia, Virginia, and then also we have some territory in Kingsport, Tennessee area. But in that, there's a lot of very rural areas with poor connectivity to broadband. And for the many reasons that Haley just said, we knew we needed to be involved in this. And, like a century ago, broadband is the foundation of economic growth, job creation, and really a better way of life. And this pandemic has just poured salt into the wound of why we already needed broadband. We all really know and see and feel it every day as we try to work from home, as we try to learn from home. There's so many reasons why we need this resource. And we believe that our assets can really play a huge part in solving this, as this webinar says, zap the gap. The electric infrastructure that we have is just very penetrated into the rural areas. It's unparalleled. And really, it's the only utility service that extends essentially into every premise. So with that, we think infrastructure is a core competency of the electric utilities, and putting mile fiber out for the purposes of broadband is infrastructure. And we're very good at doing that. We, in our project, and I'm sure we may get into that as we talk today, we really are trying to be a middle mile provider and not necessarily the service provider. And in that, we are putting the fiber into the power supply space, which we would not allow a third party to do that, but we can do that, and we can make fast-paced, installment here, because we can kind of get around some of the make-ready requirement by doing that in the power space. And really, it benefits our customers from deployment of smart circuits and smart meters. Energy efficiency and service reliability are all improvements that are gained by putting this fiber out there, in addition to the high-speed internet service we can help deliver. So to get to what we've done so far, as I said, we started this back in 2018, and in that time, we've had to pass 3 bills in the state of Virginia and 2 bills in the state of West Virginia to be able to do this and to work in this space. In fact, in Virginia, it was illegal for us as an investor-owned utility to provide this infrastructure for the purpose of something other than electricity. And so we had to do a lot of foundational work to get to where we are today. We achieved a regulatory approval in the state of Virginia back in March of this year, and that's allowed us to move forward with our project there. In Virginia, we've selected an ISP partner named Gigabeam, and we are set to build that project in very rural Grayson County, Virginia, and we are set to start hanging fiber in December of this year. That's a $17+ million project. It's 200 miles of fiber. We're taking the fiber all the way to the access point nodes of the AMI meters. and then we'll allow the ISPs to access there. And this is going to bring 52% of these 15,000 homes that are considered unserved today, meaning they have 25, 3 or less speeds, are going to have 52% of these homes fiber to the premise, and 48% with a fixed wireless solution. So these folks right now, they don't have mobile service in this region, let alone high-speed internet service. And so it's a very much needed project in this area. And then in West Virginia, we are in the RFP process to select our internet service provider there, but this is an even bigger project. We're doing 2 counties in very rural West Virginia, and Logan and Mingo counties. We have 34,000 meters there. This will be a 400 plus miles of fiber deployed, and really another area that has, a struggle for high-speed internet service. So a lot has been accomplished, and it's taken us a while to get to this point, but we're hoping we can work to create some efficiencies to move faster for some of these places that need it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As president of NARUC, I know that good ideas must be met with good policy, and regulators have to play a role in that, and many times lead on some of these issues. Both as industry leaders, what do you need from policymakers, both regulators or policymakers on a state or level, to get started? What do you still need today? How can we continue to work together across the spectrum in the public interest to make sure that policies are in place and that we are on a path forward to this more of this type of collaboration and unique type of partnerships? What would be helpful from a legislative, a regulatory, a government type perspective, understanding that all of that has to meet a public interest test? What are some things that could be worked on to get out of the way to make these projects more effective and more timely?
Well, if it's okay, Haley, I'll jump in there because
please.
it's kind of on that a little bit. And that is, we had to have a number of pieces of legislation to allow us to do this work. Like I said, we'd have 3 pieces of legislation in Virginia over 2 sessions. And so having legislative bodies that understand this and can start putting foundations in place to allow utilities to move in and play a part in this space is so important. And so I say, to those of you that don't have the framework, you've got to start there, and then making sure we're getting in front of our regulators so that we can have regulatory processes in place to expedite these projects. As I've said, we're 2 years in and we still haven't hung the first mile of fiber in Grayson County, Virginia, but it had never been done before in Virginia. And so a lot of groundwork had to be done. So we've got to get our policy folks involved. We've got to get our regulatory folks involved. And then really, can we have a national approach together as both an industry and with our policymakers and regulators to understand its importance, how we can expedite delivery to rural America through the infrastructure that we have out there, so that we can move faster. Properly targeting funding mechanisms, I think, is really important because somebody has to pay for this. We are proposing in our 2 states that I'm talking about that our customers will pay for that infrastructure out to the customer, and that can be expensive and it can be a burden on the customer. But we've also dedicated that any and all revenues generated from leasing our fiber to the last mile provider will go to offset the cost of service to the customer. But I think we all know that revenue won't offset the total cost to the customer. So if we can have better access to funding mechanisms to help offset some of the cost, I think that goes a long, long way.
Yeah, Brad, I would agree with you. And just to follow your point on the mechanisms, the electric utility industry is probably arguably facing some of the highest capital spend in its history. We're going through a tremendous transformation, both by what technology is allowing us to do, the fact that we got aging infrastructure that has to be improved upon, and customers' expectations are driving that change. And when you have that much capital pressure on you, and this opportunity comes to you, that collaborative process with our regulators is so important. And what we saw in Mississippi, we did have other issues in front of that. And our commission came together recognizing that there was this challenge in front of us. And working with them, they created a mechanism, we call it the grid mod rider, the grid modernization rider, that will allow us to take the investment we were making in this partnership with ceasefire and get timely recovery of those investments. At the same time, our credit metrics are already under a lot of challenges because of our other capital plans. So it was that is where the collaboration came together. We both had the interest to do it, but the commission working with us helped us find a way forward where we would make those investments and not harm or impact the other investments we're making to meet our customers' expectations. Another area, though, I do think that we have to look at is, as we're looking at this, more ways that we can empower our local regulators to do these things. And that's where working with those areas. For example, we think, we got to take a hard look at the pole attachment issues. We're looking at legislation here in Mississippi as well, Brad, and it sounds like it's similar to what you're doing, so we'll take a look at that, but we have the support of the Public Service Commission that will allow us to use our assets, our poles, for other broadband providers to tack on there and use that to provide service in these rural areas. And we think the option for overseeing pole attachments should be given to the local regulators, or they could take that and help oversee that.
Haley, I'm going to take a moderator's prerogative here for just a minute in this. And one of the things that, Haley, you might just want to add one comment to it, but our IRP process that we put into place last year really designates millions of dollars for grid modernization and for these type of projects, well recognized, well founded, already by the commission as being deemed as projects that would be in the IRP. Would you like to say anything about that for just a minute, and then we'll go to the next question?
Yeah, it's we're all looking at, as I mentioned earlier, technology's changing the way we look at everything from resource planning, and we're working with the commission on how we could use our integrated resource plan to really make sure we're not just looking at replacing power plants with another power plant, but how are we looking at other technologies and opportunities, distributed energy resources, demand side management programs, and how you roll those into your resource plan. But even if we have DERs out there or energy management programs or energy efficiency programs, for us to be able to take advantage of those, the customers have got to have the telecommunications wherewithal. So not only do we have an innovative IRP in there, the commission also created the incentive and opportunity for us to look at investments. I believe, Brandon, it's around $10 million a year that we can look at making those investments. And, Brad, you're familiar with this. We're already facing challenges around the 6 gigahertz spectrum. We've had to deal with it at the FTC. We also know that there are going to be challenges with our spectrum networks in the future. So if we want to make the investments now, this IRP, by creating that in incentives, will allow us to pull forward a lot of those investments we were making, look at it in a way so we can deploy these other resources that really improve the planning that we do around resources for our customers.
I just wanted to, yeah, Brandon, sure.
Oh, go ahead. If you want to finish that thought there, I just wanted to interject something.
Absolutely.
I think Haley said something that I think is really illustrative of what we need to do as an industry. He's talking about in Mississippi that they were allowed to use their grid modernization rider to do this work. Well, we already had a grid modernization rider in Virginia, but the commission there felt like we needed a broadband rider, and then tried to figure out how to separate the two costs, even though we believe they're the same cost. And so, we had to go through that process, and we're going to have to go through a similar process in West Virginia. And I think what that illustrates is that all of our regulators, all of our policymakers are going to have a different look at this. But if we could come together as an industry and get our regulators to come together from a national standpoint and say, look, this is what we need to do so we can streamline this work, I really think that's going to help, because every state is going to have a different approach. And it's going to be really hard to say, here's the playbook, go run it, because every state's going to be different.
And that's something that we're trying to work on. And during my time as president of NARUC, of course, we have a broadband expansion task force, and I'm going to be reaching out to stakeholders, and definitely EEI being one of those, as we go forward, looking at policies that our task force puts out. And I think this is a good spot for us to get y'all involved, and your perspective will be announcing some stakeholders on that. So we'll definitely follow up with EEI. I think that's a good point. Let's hit our next question. I think this is a good one to put out since we're talking about regulators. The panel is obviously talking today about collaboration with state regulators. What do you feel, gentlemen, there is a role for our federal regulators? What would that be? What would be, for instance, things that we would want to, that you would think would be helpful to bring Chairman Chatterjee and the FERC involved in? Are there any areas there where it would be helpful?
Well, I definitely believe there's a role, whether it's at the federal regulatory level or even at Congress. Brandon, you and I've talked a lot about this. Is very similar to what the electric utility industry faced 100 years ago, right? How do you electrify rural areas? And the way we overcame that was various federal policies and programs that helped bring about that electrification. We're facing that today. And I think both regulators and Congress can help out with those programs. Entergy, along with AEP, is working with EEI and our peer utilities on various advocacy programs. We're looking at working with the administration on not only broadband deployment, but how do we minimize the financial and regulatory and all those permitting challenges, and the benefits of us really focusing on that middle mile. A lot of the stuff we're hearing about is talking about making that connection, from the curb to the home or to the customer, but a lot of where we can play that role is that middle mile. And so, yes, we've been able to do it in Mississippi by looking at making those additional enhancements to meet our needs, and then partner with another telecom company. But a grant program would help connect the rest of that distance there. And as I said earlier, maybe there is a role that FERC can play. Maybe we need to make sure that when we're deploying transmission assets, we're deploying as much fiber as possible on those issues. But I do think by empowering the local regulators who are closer to the action, who understand the needs, will help us drive a lot of that as well. So I think that cannot be lost here.
Haley, you make some great points there. I almost just give you an amen and be done, but I talk too much, so I got to keep going. But you're exactly right. I mean, this is the moment, I believe, that we finally come to realize that the market is not going to bring broadband to rural America because there is no economic sense or case for it. And so much like delivery of electricity in the 30s and 40s, we're going to have to put some federal policies together that would really make this the new need for America for utilities, to be able to leverage the assets that we have. I mean, I've got a couple of points I want to share that I think really where federal legislation could help. And that is, one is recognizing that utilities can help accelerate broadband expansion into underserved areas. I think that's something that could be helpful. I think we need to guard against redundancy, because that's something that we don't need to do, is spend millions of dollars on redundant systems. But I think we need to include federal assistance to utility expansion that's commensurate to the telecom industry. And what I mean by that is we believe that we can help get middle mile fiber to much of rural America through the assets that we have out there in rural America. And right now, if I wanted to apply for a federal grant as an investor-owned utility, there's only really one fund I can apply to, and that's RDOF, the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. And if I look at what I would have to do as a company, I would have to commit to an area, bid on that area, and then say I'm going to provide service to that area. And I have to make that commitment now because the short application is due now. And I don't have a regulatory case to support it, nor do I have an ISP partner to deliver the service. And so it just doesn't make sense for us as investor-owned utilities to be able to do that in the current format. And that's $16 billion that can help rural America. And even then, the FCC maps are very, very wrong. And that's just the way it is, because the FCC says that if one person in a census block is served by 25.3 or more speed, then that entire census block is served. And by that definition, Grayson County, Virginia, which is the most unserved county in the Commonwealth of Virginia, doesn't qualify for $1 of RDOF. So we've got to have funds that really make sense for these rural areas that desperately need this service. And I think that's where we can really help. And then I mentioned the streamlined process, which I think can be helped on the federal level as well. And then really, we've got to improve those FCC maps. There's got to be a new way to have these maps measure who is served and unserved, because the current format does not work.
Absolutely. I think we have so many of us, I know y'all have both in your respective roles at Appalachian Power and Entergy, have heard us talk about the problems with the FCC maps, and they're absolutely horrendous. And have caused a lot of consternation. Just the example you give about the county there in Grayson County, Virginia, that's a very good example. And trust me, there are a lot of those places in Mississippi too. Guys, we are running out of time. We're going to give y'all both a minute apiece to just make some closing comments, things that if we didn't touch on them, that you want to touch on, and then we're going to open it up for questions. So, Haley, you went first in the intro. Brad, how about you kick it off, and Haley can wrap us up?
Well, sure. Let me say thanks, Brandon, for allowing us to participate in this. I really enjoy talking about this topic. You know, we at AEP and Appalachian Power are very passionate about the work we believe we as a company and an industry can do here. You know, if I could offer up anything in closing thoughts, is that advocacy is the key. You know, our industry has to be advocates for this if we believe in it. We as an industry need to be together, moving forward on how we can play a part in this. You know, we had a great struggle to get where we are today. But one thing that we've got to also keep in mind is that we've got, you know, cable providers and telecom providers out there who really have been difficult to work with in us coming to this part of their part of the industry as they would see it. And, you know, we were very clear up front, we do not want to be a service provider. We want to be an infrastructure provider, and we want to lease this to someone who can solve the digital problem or the digital gap. And with that said, we've got to make sure that we're being transparent in what we're doing as an industry, that we're inclusive of them and how they can play a part, because it takes both the telecom industry and us to solve this national problem. And I think we can do it. I think we can do it because we have very smart people who put electric service out there in a lot of places that never thought they'd see it many moons ago. And now it's everywhere. And I really think we've got to get to that same point with broadband. So looking forward to future conversations, and thanks so much for allowing me to be part of the panel.
Thank you, Brad. Haley?
Amen to that, Brad. I totally agree. And Brandon, thank you for this opportunity. And EEI, thank you for sharing. But let me just end it this way. It is about collaboration. If you look at the telecommunications companies and the electric utilities, we cover this country. And if we all align on the simple fact that we can better the lives of our customers and our communities through this collaborative effort, we can figure a path forward. We're not here to be a competitor to the telecom companies. We're trying to improve the lives of our customers because our worlds are changing in those telecommunications. And the final thing I will offer this too, having gone through this, that I would share with our other utilities out there, break down the silos internally. It wasn't until Brandon Presley brought me in his office and asked us, as we were looking at grid modernization, is what can you do to also improve rural broadband? When we got inside and I brought IT and our power gen people and our transmission, our distribution, operation was talking about all these devices they're deploying, all these needs they had, but they couldn't access them now because we didn't have fiber. And we had this great need. And until we brought the right people to the table and set C-Spire at the table with us, we found a way to align and work together and deliver this. And I think more of that can happen. And we just got to find ways to empower that. So I'm excited about it. And I was glad to be able to play and work with you, Commissioner, on that, and hope we can do more things like this.
Absolutely. And Haley, I, of course, thank y'all for all that you've done. And Brad, thanks for the great example that y'all are working on. Let me say this to the audience. I believe that at NARUC, this has been my top priority, that we find a way to work together. I am convinced beyond any shadow of a doubt that one of the biggest things that we can do, both industry and regulators going forward, the biggest thing we can do together is to look at this in a holistic fashion, just as we talked about on this panel today. And so I believe we've got to be a door opener, not a gatekeeper. And as we move forward with that, I'm going to be reaching out to EEI and to other stakeholders to be a participant in our broadband expansion task force. We want to make sure those voices are heard, but please also in the audience, if you would like to reach out to me and have further conversation, I'd love to do that. We want to make sure that we are deploying everything we can from our standpoint that is in the public interest to make sure that we are doing for rural America in broadband what, as we talked about, has been done almost 100 years ago in electricity. So again, thanks to our panelists. At this time, we're going to take questions from the audience, and so we will turn it over to your questions.